This is episode 395 of Jumblethink.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Jumblethink. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host, and we have a killer conversation lined up for you today. How about it? Episode 395. Only 5 more episodes to episode 400, and we've got a lot of great conversations in store for you in the weeks and months to come ahead. Now, on the show today, our guest is Shelley Herman. She is a longtime TV host, a writer, a producer, and personality. She has a book out called My Peacock Tale, Secrets of an NBC Page. We talk about her journey and stories from behind the scenes of NBC Burbank in the mid-1970s and late 1970s with her and her friends. A page is kind of like the glue that keeps a backstage working on a Hollywood set. And so we get to hear her stories of working with people like Johnny Carson, Andy Kaufman, Betty White, and so many others. It's a really fun episode. But before we dive into the conversation, if you aren't subscribed to Jumblethink, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below and like this episode. And if you do enjoy today's episode, make sure you check out last week's episode, our conversation with my friend Erwin McManus, as we talk about how your thinking can make you either fail or set you up to be a genius. It's a wonderful conversation. We talk about his new book. Anyway, our guest today, Shelley Herman, is phenomenal, and you're going to enjoy this conversation. So let's go ahead and join the conversation with today's guest, Shelley Herman. Hey, Shelley, how you doing today?
Oh, you know what? It's a good day.
I've been really enjoying learning a lot about you and your history. You have a book out. It's called My Peacock Tale, Secrets of an NBC Page. You have been in the industry doing this and connecting both at a producer, a writer, an actress, all these different levels. You've been a part of it all.
I can be unemployed in many different areas of the entertainment industry simultaneously.
Yeah. We had Eric Roberts on a while back, and he said it looks glamorous, but you're always looking for the next job when you work in Hollywood.
Well, and I'll even go one further, is when you do get the job, you go like, they want me? So yeah, it's a constant state of questioning your capabilities, and if you can execute them once you've dazzled them with your brilliance to get the job.
Yeah. Now, I pulled you up on IMDb as I love research and I love learning about people. You were born in Pennsylvania, is that right?
Yes, and to this day, I'm addicted to tasty cakes because that's what I grew up on as a kid. They don't really have them here in California unless you go to Jersey Mike's submarine sandwich shop. They carry them there. So the peanut butter ones rule.
So I agree with that. I'm from central Pennsylvania. I'm from the just west of Harrisburg. That's where I grew up. And tasty cakes, especially those peanut butter ones with that little sponge cake in there. Oh, so good.
Yes.
So, and I will say, there is no such thing as a Philly cheesesteak outside of Philly. I have not found one yet.
You know what? I agree. I totally agree. And also, you have to have one when you go there.
That's right.
You know, it's mandatory, and yeah, it might be a gut buster for some people, but you have to do it.
It's an experience, to say the least. And there are so many good options that you should at least try it once or twice beyond that first taste. You got to try it all the place. Pat's, gyms, everywhere.
You have to have a soft pretzel with mustard on it too.
That's right. The good old Amish pretzel. Well, we have that in common, but I love that your journey is one that I think a lot of people see Hollywood as this kind of everything's glamour, everything's glitz, everything is it's like the perfect mecca of life. But the reality is that there's a process to getting involved in Hollywood. And one of those is through the page system. So talk to us a little bit about what that is, what it means to be a page, how you become a page, because it's not an easy process. And then what it means once you're a page to actually be a page.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that I became an NBC page. Right now, this year, we're celebrating our 90th anniversary.
Wow.
And little trivia, Peter Marshall, the host of Hollywood Squares, was the youngest page ever hired at NBC. He was 15 at the time. He's now 97 and sharper and smarter and brighter than all of us put together here. He's fabulous. I just saw him recently. The Page program started out in New York. Regis Philbin, Chuck Barris, Hugh Downs, Grant Tinker, recently Aubrey Plaza. They were all pages. And the idea was to get into this program. You have 18 months to make connections, meet people, observe how the entertainment industry is run. And hopefully by then you've made enough connections so that you can get your next leg up in the industry, or take that knowledge out into the private sector where it's also very valuable.
Wow.
The little caveat to all of this is now you have to be at least 21. I was 20 when I started. They like you to have at least a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Arts degree.
Wow.
You fill out an online application. They get about 16,000 applications a year, of which 2% get to the next level, which is like, I think really cool. What NBC does now is if they're interested in you, on their dime, they'll fly you out to New York or LA so you can meet with them in person to see if you're page material. And the chances of becoming a page, they say, it's easier to get into Harvard than to become a page at NBC.
That's crazy. I could be wrong on this, but I think even Tina Fey may have been a page at one point. Is that right?
I don't think she was. Now, she's a Chicago girl. She was Second City and all that.
Yeah.
So I think that's where she made her bones. But of course, she put Kenneth the Page on the map.
That's right.
For 30 Rock.
Yes.
You know, so he kind of became, you know, the gold standard of pages.
Well, I know I've been to Rockefeller Center. I've done the tour. That's always a page that gives you that tour. At least it was when I went. And I know that Burbank has a little bit of a different system than New York on some of the things that they do. And so talk to us a little bit about what your daily life was like. What were the things you were doing?
Well, sadly, NBC Burbank is no more.
That's right.
Universal Studios now takes over the tour operation, and they still do have the Page program in Los Angeles. But what the Pages do now is rotate every 3 months to different divisions within NBC. Okay. So you might work for Bravo Network or press and publicity, maybe the news department. They try to tailor things to what your aptitudes are and what your interests are. Now in New York, that you still usher the TV shows, give the tours, and you also work as NBC's ambassador dealing with talent. So you might go to the airport in a limousine to pick somebody up to take them to a particular event. You just might escort them to a certain NBC event, just, you know, to make sure that, well, back in the day, we had to have breath spray, a cigarette lighter, and a pen in our pocket at all times. That was the big thing that was going to get everybody through any crisis that ever came up.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. Now, does NBC still have the studio that's just down the street from Warner Brothers? Did they fully shut that down?
NBC does not own it, but the facility itself has been taken over by Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And Days of Our Lives is still shot there. They just rent the space from them now rather than it being part of NBC. And they're adding on to the place, and they're making it huge. And, you know, sadly, CBS Television City in Hollywood, that facility is going to be going through, I think it's a $700 million makeover. There's a very famous landmark area, the Farmers Market and the Grove, which is next door to CBS. Yeah. And they're going to expand that whole block. And thankfully, some of those wonderful studios where they did Price is Right, the Carol Burnett show, all those got landmark status as well. So they can't tear them down. Yeah. But they're going to be building up and around all of that with business, residential, and just tie that whole block together.
Now, am I right in remembering that was Desilu event originally? CBS?
Not CBS TV City. Okay. But Desilu had lots of studios throughout. I mean, some people just think of Desilu as I Love Lucy.
Right. It wasn't.
At one point, there was a studio that was RKO that Desilu had that property. And, you know, Lucille Ball was the woman who had her she was running Desilu at the time because she and Desi had divorced, but she's the one that gave the green light for Star Trek.
That's right. Yeah.
And Mannix and Mission Impossible.
Mhm.
There's a famous studio that you see at the beginning of Gone with the Wind and the title credits, the Selznick Studios. They occupied that space at one time where they did the Andy Griffith Show. A lot of those, what they would call like the rural friendly shows, were done back there. There's a place now called Red Studios that used to be part of Desilu. But on Las Palmas is where she shot I Love Lucy. So she was a huge production entity scattered all over Hollywood back in the day.
Yeah. Now, you were coming up through the Page system back in the 1970s, correct?
You know, I started June 21st, 1976, the longest day.
I find it fascinating because the 70s and early 80s, there was so much happening at NBC. You had SNL on the East Coast, you had so much production happening on the West Coast, and so you got to be a part of when Johnny Carson was there. You got to be a part of it when it was just exploding with actors and celebrities and musicians. Everyone was coming through those studios. So for you, what was a day in the life of Shelley like in those days?
Woke up, got out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. The nice thing about the job is that there was always varied things to do. We weren't like every day you're going to do this. Depending on what shows were being taped, we might be assigned to them for audience services. So we would tend to the line and usher the people to shows. Some of the shows were, in addition to the Tonight Show, Chico and the Man, Sanford and Son, Hollywood Squares, Password, a bajillion variety shows came and went through there. Bob Hope specials. Clark had a variety show. Midnight Special. Hello. I mean, that was like Friday night was a party at that place. And it's because of Midnight Special that I even knew what a page was. Because when I was in high school, a bunch of us piled into a car and got tickets to a taping to see Midnight Special. And I saw these people standing around in these ugly polyester uniforms getting paid to listen to rock and roll music as part of their job. And up until then, the only job I'd ever had was being a volunteer usher at a local theater here in town. So I thought, well, you know, hot diggity dog, that's my ticket. You know, again, it took a little more than that to get me through the front door. And part of that was a trip to go see Elvis at the Hilton in Las Vegas, and knowing a girl whose mother knew somebody who knew somebody. So it was not a straight line to get the job, for sure. Now
there are so many things to talk about. And you're married to a wonderful man who he was a part of Taxi, which was right around that same time, which I still think was probably one of the best theme songs of any TV show of all time. I thought it was really phenomenal. But did you guys meet in while you were a page? How did that happen?
You know, we probably never would have met if I'd listened to Andy Kaufman, because I had known Andy when he was doing a show called Van Dyke and Company, and very short-lived variety show. But Andy would occasionally come back and do Midnight Special, and he became a friend. So this was the 76, 77. He told me he got this job on a sitcom. But he didn't really want to do it because, he was a performance artist. He wasn't a guy that liked to read a script. And he said, it's a terrible show. My manager said it'll help my career, but don't watch it. It's a horrible show. So I missed Taxi the first time around. I had to catch it in reruns once I heard what a big hit it was. And my husband is Randall Carver. He played the character of John Burns. And he was only on the first season because his character was designed so that people that didn't live in the big cities could understand what it was like for a country bumpkin to come to the city. But they caught on to the concept very easily. And I remember on one of my first dates with Randy, we were driving down Pico Boulevard, and the Taxi theme came on the radio. And I looked at him and I said, does it make you sad to hear that song? And he says, no, it would make me sad if I heard it while driving a taxi.
Oh, that's funny. Now, you talk about Andy Kaufman there, who is mythic in many worlds, just beyond life. You think of his live performances in New York. You think about his television shows. You think about just this character. You think of Man in the Moon, where they tell his story. What was he really like behind closed doors?
I'd like to say I really knew.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think he was putting me on sometimes.
Wow.
Because Andy's whole thing was to get a reaction.
Right.
And, he would call me like at 3 a.m. and say, that there was a bug in his bathtub. What should he do? Things like that. But we had a totally platonic relationship. He asked me one time to be a part of something that he was developing at the Improv. And I detail it in the book, but when it was done, he's like jumping up and down like a schoolgirl. He was so happy on how the bit went. And I looked at him and I don't get it. I don't know what you're doing. I don't understand what's funny about this. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was still going to college at the time, and I wasn't getting paid for it. It's like, I can't keep doing this. It was too much for me.
Yeah.
But with that said, as much as he fooled people in what he was doing, his whole thing was he wanted a reaction.
Oh,
and
okay.
when you talk to people who are more smarty pants people than me, and they say, what is art?
Mm-hmm.
Art is a feeling, it's a reaction. And that's what Andy did. And I'm in touch with Lynn Margulies, who was his girlfriend at the time of his passing.
Yeah.
And yes, Andy did pass away.
Yeah.
They've just done a documentary that's gotten great reviews at Telluride, and I don't know when it will be released. They're looking for a distributor, but I like this because this is her version of Andy and not Hollywood's version. Mm-hmm. So I'm not that it's going to be drastically different, but I like that after all these years, she finally can tell people about the Andy she knew.
That's so cool. So cool. Can't wait to see that. Now, the book that you wrote, My Peacock Tale, it kind of came out of conversation. So talk to us a little bit about how this book came to be, because that story in itself is super fascinating.
Well, thank you. I'm blessed to be around the greatest group of people that I worked with at NBC to this day. There's about a dozen of us who we see each other like at least once a month. We celebrate our birthdays. We watch the award shows. We've been to our parents' funerals, each other's weddings. It's the family we chose as opposed to the ones we were born into.
Yeah.
And we've all heard our stories for decades. And when the pandemic hit and we were all isolated, we missed each other. Yeah. But then we discovered Zoom, and we started reaching out to some of our other friends who didn't live in California anymore. And I would have a story about Freddie Prinze, but somebody else might have more to it. And then another person had more. And then, I didn't know that happened after I left the room. And suddenly I had this big page jigsaw puzzle in front of me. And people kept saying, somebody should write a book. Somebody should write a book. And I am a writer, but I write daytime television and game shows. Yeah. I've never attempted a book because, again, I thought only really smart people wrote books, because that's who I read them, because I wanted to get smarter.
Yeah.
And it kind of all came together that way. And there's some sensitive things that are in the book, and I specifically about Freddie Prinze and the two women who contributed to that part of the story. I gave them the finished chapters, and I sent it to them, and I said, a professional journalist would never let the subject of the story read what they've been written about. Attach, please find the story and make sure you're comfortable with me saying what I've said in the book. And both of them signed off on it.
Okay. That's super cool. So it was in a lot of ways collaborative. It wasn't just your story, but it was the story of your friends. I love that. It seems like the Page system, it's almost like a fraternity, in that there's a kindred spirit for a lifetime. It's not just, hey, I've seen these people for 18 months. Life moves on. Goodbye. But you've really built a bond that's stood the test of time with these people.
I can certainly say that for the group of people that I've been with. And we've been clamoring for some kind of a celebration for the 90th Page anniversary out here. We haven't heard anything yet. But one of the women who's in our group, Renee, has a big backyard.
Mhm.
So we get together when the weather's nice. We get together at her place, and 40 or 50 of us will find each other, and I'll show up there. So no, we stay together, and even the ones that aren't in the entertainment industry, we help them with stories. Like one of our friends worked at UCLA and would need information. I helped her do a story about Operation Mend, which was a project they were doing to help service people who'd been injured in Iraq have plastic surgery. So we all use each other's resources and help each other that way.
It's super cool. And I think those are the kind of I don't think people realize how much those are the ways that doors get opened up to other people. It's through those relationships and just years of being in relationship with the same people that it often is the very thing that brings the richness to life, brings things together, opens up doors to opportunities. And so for you, it sounds like this was a spark for your career. It really was what set you up on the journey that you're on.
Well, and also being the fly on the wall in a lot of very exciting atmospheres, you also learn what not to do. And I find that to be important. Well, you learn not to be a jerk. That's the first thing, because there's a story in my book. Courtney Conte was he was like the Kenneth for the show Midnight Special. He'd answer the phones and take care of the needs of the people backstage.
Yeah.
And one of the people came up to him was Helen Reddy's husband, Jeff Wald.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Jeff was a huge jerk.
Yeah.
And he said to Courtney, I've ordered some sandwiches, and could you go up to the front gate and get them for me? And Courtney says, I'm not allowed to leave my station here. I have to answer the phone. And Jeff started cussing at him.
Oh, wow.
And picked up the phone and threw the phone at Courtney. But it was one of those older phones that had the curly Q cord on it.
Came back and hit him.
And he threw it and it bounced back at him. So it turns out a couple executives were walking by when this happened. And they threw Jeff off the lot.
Wow.
So fast forward a couple decades later, Courtney is now the executive in charge of production for Carson Warner Productions.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff Wald's client was Roseanne Barr.
Yeah.
So Courtney went over to Jeff and said, hey, remember me? and Jeff didn't. And Courtney explained it to him, and Jeff apologized. And he said, and Jeff's own word, he says, I was strung out on cocaine back then. I was a mess. I've changed my life. But you never know who you're going to meet along the way.
Yeah, so true. So true. Now, one of my favorite things in the world of television, or at least had been for several years, is the world of late night. I'm a big Letterman fan. And of course, we know the feud between Leno and Conan, Leno and Letterman, Leno and anyone else that wanted to host a late night show. But before all of that, there was a feud for late night that happened with Johnny Carson. And you have some really interesting insights and backstory to that.
It's the feud that never should have happened.
Mm.
It's heartbreaking on so many levels. And again, reaching out to former pages is the way I got the story. Plus, I use this thing called WhatsApp on the phone, and I had an hour-and-a-half conversation with Joan Rivers' former manager.
Oh, wow.
And she was there for the whole thing. Mm. And she told me everything that went down, and it's detailed in the book. But long story short, there was a guy who used to be like a big practical joker at NBC.
Yeah.
Named Jay Michaels.
Okay.
And if I were to say, if you didn't have an obscene nickname from Jay Michaels, you were nothing at NBC. I mean, he was the most politically incorrect person ever at NBC.
Wow.
And he was adored, and he's missed to this day.
Yeah.
Because he got the job done. He was good at what he did.
Yeah.
But somehow or another, a letter got circulated that had a list of people who could possibly replace Johnny Carson when he retired. Now, Johnny had never announced his retirement at this point. He was nowhere near it.
Yeah.
And it was a list of men's names. The only one that that Dorothy remembered was David Brenner's name was on the list, but Letterman wasn't on the list. Leno wasn't on the list. And in J. Michael's handwriting on the letter, it said, "You have no home here," and gave the letter to Edgar, Joan's husband.
Oh my goodness.
Now, keeping in mind, Johnny mentored Joan.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was the first woman who wasn't a singer who guest hosted his show.
Yeah.
All the other Florence Henderson, Helen Reddy, those people, all singers. He liked what she was doing.
Mm-hmm.
They were friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
The logical thing would have been to call Johnny directly and say, what the F is going on here?
Yeah. Yeah.
But they got mad. They wanted to get even. Mm-hmm. And they cut a deal at Fox. And that's what started the late night booking wars, because if you were going to be on Joan's show, you couldn't be on Johnny's show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was 7 months of torture. It never should have happened. The show was canceled. It set a precedent for late night about these booking wars, mm-hmm. which never should have happened. And led, sadly, to a depression for both of them and Edgar's suicide.
Wow.
It just didn't need to happen.
Wow.
And yes, Joan did try to call Johnny, but you can't keep a secret in this town. He knew what was going on, and he wouldn't accept her call.
Yeah. Yeah. It seemed like Johnny Carson could be your best ally, but if you hurt him, he didn't let go of those things. He was very loyal, and he expected loyalty to other people. That's what it appeared like from the outside, hearing all these stories. And so I can't imagine both sides, just how rejected and how, brokenhearted they must have felt about the situation.
Well, Joan had been admonished a few times by Peter LaSalle, who was the producer of the show. Everybody thinks it was Fred DeCordova pulling all the strings, but Peter LaSalle was really the one that was running that show.
Yeah.
And boy, he kept it running. A lot of credit to him.
Yeah.
And he said, "Joan, your material's getting a little edgy. Enough with the fat Elizabeth Taylor jokes. It used to be Heidi Brahma, which you made fun of. Now you're making fun of people that could be guests on our show."
Yeah.
And I think because Joan was like, it's my turn now. I think that's what she really wanted to do that. And I just feel so sorry for everyone involved, because it didn't have to happen that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Now for you, before you were a Page even, you had some insights into the world of Hollywood from game shows that you were a part of, right?
Yes. I was a contestant twice on The Dating Game when it was hosted by Jim Lang.
Wow. And, the great Jim Lang.
Yeah. I was 17. I was still in high school. And the first trip, I was bachelorette, and I picked a guy, and we went to San Diego, California, which is like a 2-hour drive down the road.
Yeah.
And then the second guy that I won, we went to the Bahamas.
Oh.
And I remember when Jim Lang says, "You're going to the Bahamas." And I hugged the guy that I won, and I whispered in his ear, "Where are the Bahamas?" I had no idea. Agora High School geography class. I must have been absent that day.
So even in those moments when you were doing the game show, were you already going, maybe Hollywood's the place for me? Maybe the world of television is the world for me. Were those things going on in your mind as you're a contestant?
Not really. It's just that I had seen other people do it, so I tried, and I was a big theater geek. Mm-hmm. So as you can tell, I'm not shy. So it seemed just to be like a natural extension of like, oh, I could win a free trip someplace. Yeah, I have the ability to do that. But I only thought like really tall, pretty girls got to be in show business, and I'm like 5'0" and I was kind of a tomboy. So I didn't really think in those terms, but it's just hanging around the Chuck Barris people after doing the show, and we would do game show run-throughs as Chuck was trying to develop shows. And it turns out that he started taping the Gong Show a week before I got to NBC. So when I got there, I knew all the fellas already. So I kind of felt a little bit at home that way.
Yeah.
But no, it again, let's go in the Wayback Machine in 1976. A lot of women weren't doing those kind of jobs, writing.
Right.
They were assistants and production assistants, but never really getting their own desks, in a room with writers. No, not really.
Wow.
So maybe I was a little bit, ahead of the curve that way, but
Yeah.
it just seemed like a natural extension of who I am and what I can do.
A trailblazer.
Okay, let's use that word.
It's a good word. Now, on the flip side of that, not only did you kind of have, well, you didn't kind of, you did have this experience where you do these game shows. Along the way, you end up writing for game shows. So first off, what does it even mean to write for a game show? Because that it seems like it's unscripted. And of course, I'm assuming at least most good shows, the winnings aren't scripted, but the show itself is scripted. So what is that like? And how did you land back in that world after being a page?
Well, I always feel like I'm lifting up the curtain behind the Wizard of Oz here, because if a game show is done properly, you don't think it's written.
Yeah.
But if you think about the different formats there are for shows, there's a show like Jeopardy where the answers need to be written and the questions need to be written. Ken Jennings and Mayim Bialik don't make all that stuff up on their own. There's other shows like the first show I wrote on was a show called The Liars Club.
Okay.
And it was 4 celebrities who were all given an object, and they had to convince the contestants that what the story they were telling was truthful.
Yeah.
So not only did we have to write something about what the object really was, we had to come up with 3 bluffs as to what it was.
Yeah.
There's other shows where, like a show like Password, that you don't think, well, but there's a dramatic build to each of these shows where things start off a little bit easier and then get harder. And we can't pick what we're going to do, as far as like, we have packets of questions that we've selected. And then somebody from the network, their broadcast standards department, their compliances department will come over and say, okay, we're taking this envelope. So we can't say, "Ooh, the pretty blonde over there," or the military guy. We have to give them easy questions. No, we don't. You can't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
On a show like Match Game, they actually had Dick DiBartola. He wrote for Mad Magazine, so he was writing the blanks, fill in the blank questions from the standpoint of a comedy writer.
Wow.
So there's all these different elements. And then when I was working on Supermarket Sweep, not only did we have to write the questions, but because the production company was getting paid extra for doing some product integration.
Yeah.
So we had to write a certain amount of questions that was from a certain food company. So if there seemed to be like a lot of wishbone dressing questions, it's because we had to make a certain amount of our content wishbone dressing things. So there's all kinds of aspects that go into that.
Yeah. Who knew? I mean, I'm a podcaster. And so people go all the time, well, your job is to have a conversation. How hard can that be? And I'm like, well, a good conversation is incredibly hard because you have to research, you have to know what you're doing, and then you have to listen. So you figure out, what are the cues? What are the things I'm picking up on? And I think that a lot of people are like, oh, it sounds so spontaneous. Like you just had this conversation. It's like, yeah, the most spontaneous conversations are actually probably some of the ones that are most prepared for. They're the ones that you're ready for so that you can ask the right question at the right time. And so it sounds like game shows are similar to that, in that there's kind of a dance that goes on where you both are writing towards an outcome, but you're also hoping that it gets the response from whoever's playing in that spot.
Well, and I'll tell you this too, that Tom Snyder, who had the show that was on after Johnny Carson, the Tomorrow Show, he prided himself on never reading an author's book, never reading an actress's bio, because his theory was, I don't know who you are. Tell me. My audience doesn't know who you are.
Yeah.
What should I know about you?
Yeah.
And hopefully they were getting the right kind of talent who could speak up about those things and not just yep and nope them the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Larry King was the same way, if I remember correctly, too. And that, of course, he had the audience, the call-in portion of it, which helped, I'm sure, but that it was just being naturally curious throughout the process.
Well, and also Larry King had a few years on Tom Snyder and knew everybody and everything going into it, whereas Tom may not. Well, Tom actually was a local newsman at KNBC when I was there, so he was learned, but only what he wanted to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I was born in 81. I'm 42, which continues to feel older the more I think about it. But I don't remember a day in my life where I didn't feel like Larry King was old.
Yeah, that is true.
So,
Yeah, and I'm a few semesters older than you are, and I feel the same way.
so you've worked in these different spaces, but there's a level of showmanship that's a part of what you do, where you're sometimes creating a character. And this is one of my favorite things to ask actors and actresses is, you create characters for a living. And I think in our culture now, where we want to be influencers and there's thought leaders and there's celebrity hosts of podcasts and all of these different people who are creating content like I am right now with you. Mm-hmm. And there's this level of creating persona. And you even alluded to it at the beginning when we were talking about Andy Kaufman. For you, it sounds like part of your secret to success is being genuinely yourself, just authentically you as you come to serve as a writer, as a producer, as an actress, in all these spaces that you are certain in what you're doing, that you are you. And you can create a character. You can put that on the show, but you can come back out of it. And I think for younger generation of creators, they really struggle with knowing who they are. So if you were talking to a younger creator, a person who is putting a show on for the world, and they're really struggling with that understanding of, at the end of the day, when I'm at my house, when I'm sitting in my bedroom, when I'm watching the television, when I'm with my spouse, significant other, whatever that is, they don't know how to turn back to themselves. What would you speak to them to encourage them?
Wow, you've unpacked something that is really important to me. I would say to them, why do you watch a sporting event? Mm-hmm. Because it's live.
Yeah.
And you look for the heroes, you look for the mistakes, and that's what gets your energy going. Being your best authentic self, because the camera doesn't lie.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to be funny and trying to be witty, people know you're forcing it.
Yeah.
That's I'll back up to Andy. When I read Bill Zemmy's book, I hadn't known this about Andy, but one of his earlier jobs was working for a screenwriter named Norman Wexler. And Norman would do things that were slightly criminal. And Andy would have a microphone and a tape recorder with him.
Yeah.
And for example, like they staged a robbery at a donut store. And Andy had the tape recorder going, and they had all the authentic audio of what was going on there. And then Norman would take that and put it into his screenplays so that you had this authentic dialogue. So what I would encourage anybody to do, whether they're in the entertainment industry, an influencer, trying to sell insurance, take an improv class.
Oh.
Because I've been taking improv classes since before you were born. And yeah, since before you were born. And I'm presently in one now with Andy Goldberg's Off the Wall group.
Yeah.
And what it teaches you to do is listen. And it also teaches you how to be true to yourself and express yourself properly.
Yeah. So
if I'm doing a character, because I work as an actor also, if I'm doing a character, I'm just me, but I'm me happy. I'm me sad. I'm me pissed off. I'm me out of breath being athletic, whatever it is, but it's all still me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why it stays true to what you're doing. So be your best self that way. Find and tap into that. And even if you're someplace where they don't have improv classes, go online. There's a lot of people that are doing it now on Zoom, and you'll find it's very liberating. And if you're going up for job interviews, you're going to feel more confident. If you're sales, you'll feel more confident. So be your best you. That's my advice, and be true to yourself.
Yeah. Love that. That's so good. And I think in a society where we're knowing less and less about, we're trying to figure out who we are. And it seems like the harder we try, the less we know about ourselves sometimes. And I think that getting to that place where we can be true to ourselves and just be naturally ourselves, that's a powerful place. It gives a lot of confidence, like you said, but it also it gives certainty about your future as a person. As we kind of move towards the end of this segment, one thing that you say is that Hollywood is filled with regular people. And I think that that's a powerful thing. We're nearing 400 episodes. We've been doing this show since 2017. I've gotten to talk to famous actors and billionaires and no politicians. I don't really want them on the show, but
smart man.
Yeah. I want it to be an honest podcast. I don't know if there's any politician that can be honest. But I've talked to a wide range of authors and educators and across the board. And the one thing I realize is that we look at other people and other segments of life. Maybe you look at a Hollywood elitist, you look at a business owner, executive, you look at an author, and we put them outside of our context of like regular. We say, oh, I could never do that because look at their life, or I could never be an actor. They're just special people. There's something special about them. And one thing I love about that context of being regular people is that it means it's approachable. And so we love dreams and ideas here. We love encouraging people to chase those dreams and ideas. So you're talking to a young actress or a young actor who's coming up. You're talking to someone that wants to become a writer, and they look at it and they say, "Oh, I'm from a little town in Florida, or I'm from nowhere, West Virginia. I'm from Oregon or Nevada or somewhere," and that's just too detached for me. If you were talking to them and they're saying, "But my dream is to get involved," what would you tell them about the industry?
The first thing I would say is you can start wherever you are. Mm. There's showbiz everywhere. And you were even mentioning Florida and places like that. There's a lot of the entertainment industry, Atlanta, that's happening outside of Hollywood. Keep in mind the word show business is 2 words, and knowing the business aspect of it is really important. And a lot of times people say, when you're an actor, when you're doing a character, you're just lying while you're doing that. No. You're really telling the truth as best you can. Yeah, when you look at the good ones, that's what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And they may be putting on airs while they're doing it, but they're not lying. They're telling the truth. Yeah. So I would say start local, branch out. Now people can audition for things. You don't have to be in Hollywood or New York to do it. And find what it is that's your strength and work hard at that. Mm-hmm. And then, like I mentioned earlier too, learn what not to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have like what I call my Lucy Ricardo thinking cap on sometimes. Yeah. And I might do things that are a little bit outrageous to get attention for myself or to draw attention to something else, but it's never in a malicious way or in a way that's hurtful. Mm-hmm. I also say volunteer. Meet people, find who the local theater is in your area. And you know what, you talk about, Hollywood, they're not regular people. There's award shows and there's patting each other on the back all the time. And, but that industry is somebody's making that gown. So somebody is doing that person's hair. Somebody's doing that person's makeup. And all that money that actor's making goes to keeping that image up. Mm-hmm. But why not celebrate electricians and plumbers and teachers? And not just celebrate actors. Let's celebrate everybody.
I love it. We do rapid fire questions. So I want to take a few minutes to ask a couple rapid fire questions. The first one is, if you were to recommend one book to someone who has a dream to chase or an idea that they want to create, what book would you recommend?
The dictionary.
Love it.
Every answer will be in there. You just have to put the words together.
Yeah. I love that.
I don't mean to be flip about that, but back in my day, before the internet, I lived with my dictionary and a thesaurus. Yeah. Because people would talk about stuff I didn't know about, and I had to figure out what they were talking about. Yeah. So that's my answer.
Well, right behind me on my bookshelf, somewhere over there, I have a dictionary and thesaurus that I pull out all the time for things, because sometimes it's just quicker than trying to search it on the internet even. So I love having a paper book. I think there's something magical about that. I'm curious, you have been so involved in the world of creating for so many different spaces and for different platforms, whether that be the world of game shows or sitcoms. You've served in many spaces. But what did you want to do when you were a kid?
I didn't want to be a mom.
Oh.
So what I did is I would seek out what it is that other things that girls could do.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out that my aptitude was for public speaking or for communication. So I went kind of with the journalism route. And then a piece of advice that I give a lot of people starting out is never have something to fall back on.
Mm.
Because there's a tendency to, oh, I'll get my teaching credential to have something to fall back on. And then 20 years later, you're like, oh, the parade passed me by. Yeah. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So I guess I was looking for something to do that I could communicate to people. Yeah. And I didn't quite know what that was, but I found it in working in television. I did talk radio for a while here in Los Angeles, and writing, journalistically. But yeah, I didn't know exactly what, but I knew the direction.
Yeah. Now, you, by most people's standards, they would look at your life, they'd read your biography, they'd read through your book, and they would say, Shelley is an example of success. But for you personally, how do you define success?
Success is, for me, being able to live your authentic self and to be able to spread that around to other people that might not know how to get to where they want to go or meet who they want to meet. Mm-hmm. Or it's amazing how you can give somebody a piece of advice and it changes everything for them. Yeah. I was at my 50th high school reunion last weekend, and a girl came up to me and she told me that I had said something to her 50 years ago. Mm. I didn't even remember saying it to her, but wow. Because of that, she went on and did da 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 da. Mm-hmm. So you put the pebble in the water there, it kind of ripples out. Mm-hmm. I don't think success is necessarily always being happy or comfortable.
Yeah,
but being able to do what you want to do, mm-hmm. and not hurt other people in the process. Yeah,
I think that's great. Well, our last rapid fire question, and probably my favorite question to ask people, whether they're on the show or just talking to them in life, is, we all have those bucket list items. We all have those things that we want to do in life. What's the one dream that you have that you still want to accomplish in life?
Well, before the book, I was going to say to be Mrs. Kevin Kline. Once Phoebe was done with him. Yeah. That was the dream. Now my current dream, I would love to see somebody do something with this book, like as a TV series, or something like that. Because it's kind of a little bit like Sex and the City meets Mad Men. And it's an important era for me because, I was growing up with Ms. Magazine and starting to see things like That Girl and Mary Tyler Moore and Mrs. Peel on the Avengers, and starting to see women starting to figure it out. I mean, when I was in high school, women couldn't have their own credit cards. Wow. You had to have your husband or daddy sign for it.
So crazy
to see how that evolution has come about, and still staying at it, still working at it. So I don't know that in a dramatic or comedic sense that era has been acknowledged enough for young girls and women. So that's my next dream, my next goal. And then if Phoebe's done with him, I'll reconsider Kevin Kline.
Love that. Now, as we wrap up, I want to give a moment for you to share maybe one story you love to share that you didn't get a chance to share on the interview so far.
Wow. Okay, I'll do a motivation story.
Okay.
I mentioned before about my Lucy Ricardo thinking cap.
Yeah.
And as a page, we're encouraged to meet the executives, to meet the producers around the studio, to try to make connections. And at the time, there was a man named Dick Ebersol, who was the biggest guy NBC had. He and Lorne Michaels together started Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And he had offices in Burbank as well as New York. So whenever he was in Burbank, I was trying to get an appointment to see him, because I was convinced that if he met me, he would think I was the greatest. He'd hire me. We'd take over the world, all that kind of 20-year-old thinking. And I could never get through his secretary to get an appointment. So I'm driving home from work one night and I'm hearing talk radio, and they said, and our next guest is Dick Ebersol. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I pulled off the road. It was raining. I pulled off the road, shoved some quarters into a payphone at a Shell gas station. And the call screener said, what do you want to talk to him about? And I said, oh, well, I'll talk to him about Gilda Radner, whatever. And got on the air and I said, hi, my name is Shelley Herman and I'm a page here at NBC. And I've been trying to get an appointment to see you for months now, but your secretary won't let me see you. So could you promise me right here on the air, right here and now, that you'll make an appointment to see me the next time you're in the office? And he said, yes. Uh-huh. So we had the appointment, and he promptly told me that I should leave NBC. And I just got there. And he said that NBC would value me more if I had more experience on the outside and they had to hire me back. Wow. So that was his bit of advice.
Wow. Incredible. But the gumption to just go after it and find creative solutions to get that meeting. It's such a powerful story.
Well, it's one of the things I say to people too, is if you have a meeting where you're trying to get a meeting to see somebody, make them want to see you, not have to see you.
Yeah.
And in that particular case, and in the case of the woman I met who got me in at NBC originally, there was something I did that intrigued them. So that's another thing I like to tell people just starting out is be interesting, be fascinating.
Yeah. Too many boring people anyway, right?
Well, too many people that are intimidated. And that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for people that have some kind of confidence, or that can do some freelance thinking and be the idea person, be the creative person. Yeah. Be the person that lights their fire too.
Yeah. Now, as we wrap up this interview, I always want to make sure we mention at the beginning of the episode in our introduction, but how can people connect with you? How can they get this book? Because it's a fascinating read. How can they hear more of your stories and see what you're doing?
Well, I have a website, My Peacock Tale, spelled Tale, mypeacocktale.com, and people can send me notes there. It's mypeacocktale@gmail.com. It's not a state secret or anything. And I want to give credit to Jack Hanna for that title, because while I was working on the book, I was listening to Jack Hanna on TV talking about peacock tails. Yeah. And I went on GoDaddy and, My Peacock Tale is available. It's available on Instagram. It's available on Facebook. It's available on Twitter. And that's how I got the name of the book.
I love Jack Hanna, such a legend, and both in Columbus Zoo, but also on late night circuits and his I think his Sunday or Saturday morning show.
Saturday morning,
yeah, fascinating guy, and he's lived an amazing life, and so that's really cool.
Yeah, so that's my Peacock Tale, TALE.com.
And we'll put those links in the episode notes because, we know it's easier if you just click it if you're listening. So if you're listening right now,
Amazon has it. I would encourage you to, if you're not in a super big rush to get the book, or you're shopping for the holidays, go to your local bookstore and have them order it and help them out too.
Awesome. Shelley, thank you so much for taking time out and sharing some insights into a world that many of us will never see. And just hearing these stories, it's such a fun time. So thank you so much for joining us here on Jumble Think.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation with Shelley Herman. What a wonderful story she has. And I'll always love hearing the behind the scenes stories. You know, we watch TV, we watch movies, and we know all of the behind the scenes stuff is so much juicier than we could ever imagine just watching the show itself. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, subscribe to the show. Click that button. Make sure you never miss another episode of the show. We've got a lot in store in the weeks to come. Next week on the show, I'm going to share some stories about what's happening in my life and the life of Jumblethink. We've made some changes. And one of them, of course, you're seeing right now, the video format of Jumblethink, a dream come true for us. But beyond that, there's been a lot of changes in the last year, and I want to catch you up on everything that's happening. So make sure you check out next week's conversation where I share some exciting things happening at Jumblethink and things you have to look forward to. Hey, thanks again for tuning into today's conversation. As always, make sure you get out there, dream big, and change the world around you.
En avant, en arrière, sur les côtés. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps. Vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.